thermos flask, what would you do with that?
No, what you would do with that ideally is to wrap it in newspaper and transport it either in the cool box with enough ice packs to keep that cool box well loaded.
Yeah.
Because obviously space is a big thing. You have to fill the space with the cold ice packs.
Yeah.
Also, this is why smaller items like that can be good for a couple of packs of mackerel where you can fill up with ice blocks.
So obviously the newspapers are really important to wrap those in. If we then move from the frozen baits over to our fresh or our live baits,
yes.
Would you say that newspaper is as important with ragworm and lugworm?
Very much so. It acts also as an absorbent with the bait, take out any excess juice or liquid or whatever that is in the bait, which firms the bait up, keeps it in tip-top condition, and also again that wrapped in paper with some ice blocks. Obviously be careful not to directly place the bait on the ice blocks, but keep the cold environment the same, and that will transport just as well. Probably
one tip I think that's quite useful is to say, but using fresh bait, if you've got it in a fridge, probably one of the best things you can use is a cat litter tray.
Oh, without doubt, without doubt. The cat litter trays are the key to keeping bait, because you can split the bait up into smaller proportions, keep the bait isolated in smaller units, so if the worst does happen and part of the bait goes off, you haven't lost all your bait. Spreading out bait does help. So one of the other things is obviously you get your bait into newspaper, you put it in the newspaper, stick it in the fridge, leave it. That's not the thing to do. You must check it and change. Got to look after bait. Changing paper? Yes, changing paper. Temperatures of fridge are very important. And something that I need to stress to a lot of the shops we deliver to, the temperature of bait needs to be kept at a higher temperature in the fridges in the summer than in the winter. Yeah. Because obviously you're looking at outside temperatures, which the bait is used to. Coming out of those temperatures, you don't need the shock factor, especially with ragworm. And what about with lugworm? Obviously there are a couple of different types of lugworm. We've actually got some Welsh black lugworm here. For those, not necessarily putting them on top of paper and leaving them, what would you actually do with those? We would roll those. We would roll those in what they call a wrap, which is a wrap of 10, rolled in 3 sheets of newspaper, dry newspaper, wrapped individually in a roll. Yeah. The good thing with that is once you've done that, you can actually put those straight into a fridge and you can actually leave them. They're stored and done. They're done. And if you were to take those onto a beach and you used them, but you didn't use all of them, you can actually take them back home and refreeze them. The beauty of black lug is there's no wastage, because obviously you can freeze black lug. You can take so many for a session, use half if you don't have a particularly hectic session. The rest can go home and be frozen. And they could be just as good bait for dabs and whiting as a fresh bait.
Right, Peter, we got Red Ice here, which is Ultima's biggest selling main line. Yeah. It comes in 2 colours. There's fluorescent red. It's a copolymer line, and they also do what they call black ice. As in driving conditions in the winter, you can't see your black ice, so you can't see this line. This basically ticks all the boxes you want as a fishing line, as a main fishing line. It is very, very abrasion resistant. Yeah. It has got very, very good visibility. The knot strength in it is excellent. It is incredibly good, and as I say, with the visibility of it, it's a very good line to use in the daytime and at night, because you can, when you're winding in, you can see exactly where your trace is coming from, because all you've got to do is follow the line down into the water.
I think sort of fishing on the promenade near where we live down at Colwyn Bay, I think you see a lot of families using it as well. Sort of, I think the colour goes well for the kids, to be honest with you. But you see so many of them fishing with it.
Yeah, but it's
instantly recognisable, isn't it, really?
Yeah, but it's very good for kids to use because they can actually see where their line's coming from. You know what kids are like when they're fishing.
Yeah, trying to wait for that fish to come in over the top of the waves.
That's it,
yeah, like when we were kids, I suppose, you sort of reel in hoping something's going to come and it gives you that pointer.
Yeah. It's available in Breaking Strange from £12 to £35.
Yeah, so that's more.
So it covers all the multitudes.
So they could even snip a bit off and use it as a snood if they wanted to.
If you wanted to, If you push come to shove, you could do that.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
What sort of spool sizes is the red and black ice available in?
Well, this is the black ice, which is a clear line, and it's available in filler sizes, which are 300 metres. They do a 4-ounce spool, and they also sell it in the half kilo size spool.
Ideal for the families, I think.
They are, that's perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, Shane, so then the big thing is putting a sand eel on.
Right.
How do we do it? Everybody has their own way.
Yes.
And obviously where you fish is North Wales with lots of sand eels.
Right.
So tell me the best way, if I can get a sand eel out, the best way to put that sand eel on the hook.
Right, okay. Okay, you take the sand eel. Now you want to take 2 cuts of the sand eel. Firstly, you want to take it just ahead of the gill cover and just about a quarter of the way down the sand eel. Take the tail section. That is in effect helping the juices and the scent to come out of the eel. You take the sand eel like so. You take the hook and then you obviously feed the eel up the hook shank, keeping the point within the eel.
You never ever let it come out?
No, you don't let it come out because then you start bursting the skin and bursting the eel. Then you need to secure the sand eel to the hook, especially if you're going to be casting any distance. And the best thing we find for that is elasticated cotton, a fine variety. This variety is called Gold Zac, can be bought in any fine haberdasheries. So like so, you bind the sand eel to the hook.
So you've gone up and down that? And
I've gone up and down once, and I will again repeat the process down to secure the sand eel.
Do you tie a knot?
I do not tie a knot because this fine elastic will bite into the sand eel, and when you break it off, it won't unravel. Right. It'll sit where it's been broken, like thus. Perfect. As you can see, there's no unravelling there. And all you want to do then is pull down your bait stop to stop the bait from moving up the line when casting, and there is a presented sand eel bait.
And that's perfect because you can see the blood that's just coming out at the bottom of the eel, and that's basically straight where the fish is going to go.
That's the attractant. That's the attractant. All fish feed on scent, and that is an attractant, all bottom feeding fish.
And a good point there as well is you've got a sequin on there, and that basically holds the sand eel in place.
Yes.
So that if it does slip a little bit, you've got that there just holding it up against the stop knot.
The sequin will hold it and keep it to the hook point where obviously the action end of the hook.
Perfect.
Where you need the hook to be, or the fish to be taking the hook.
And that would be your key dogfish bait, wouldn't it?
That's a key dogfish bait without any doubt. And in larger varieties, the same principle, a skate bait.
Yeah.
And a bullhuss bait.
Sand eels actually come in different sizes.
They come in different sizes. They come in 4 or 5 different sizes. They come in small, medium, large, extra large, and what they call jumbo.
And there's also something, there's a launch,
There's a launch, And
that's what they call a greater sand eel.
That's a greater sand eel, which is very effective fished in large chunks for bigger species.
Perfect.
Again, the same principle, using the elasticated cotton to secure the launch to the hook.
Brilliant. Okay, Shane, so we've got some beautiful ragworm here.
Yes.
These are called king rag, aren't they?
They're king rag, yes. They're the king rag. Yes.
So putting these on a hook, there's a number of ways, but probably the easiest way, thread it straight on the hook.
Thread it straight on the hook. Would you like me to do that?
I would do.
Just take the ragworm accordingly, take the hook point and the ragworm, again, pass the hook point through the head of the ragworm, feed the ragworm up the hook point, like so, keeping the hook in the worm at all times. Depending on what size of bait you require, nip the bait accordingly. There is the finished article.
There's a lot of juice that come out of that, wouldn't there?
Yes, there is. There's a lot of scent, a lot of juice, and it's very attractive to a whole host of species. Again, we will pull down the bait stop, which will stop the bait from moving up the line when casting, and that couldn't be a finer bait, all ready to go to the seabed.
Okay, so we've baited up the bottom hook with the king ragworm,
yes.
And now we're going to use the lugworm. But this is a different type of lugworm to the common lugworm.
Yes.
This is a black lug.
This is the Welsh black lug, yes, which is a large variety of lugworm, which you gut as you dig and is preserved by rolling in newspaper and can last any time up to 10 days in that state.
The difference between obviously the ragworms, which we can see here, which are all thriving around
yes.
on the paper,
yeah.
is this one is basically laying flat, and that's because it's been
gutted.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Which is the general rule of thumb.
So if we were going to bait this up, how would we do that, Shane?
Well, ideally, you would throw the worm onto a hard surface, which in effect contracts the worm beautifully to be put on the bait, to be put on the hook rather. And that now is ready to go on the hook.
Perfect.
It can go in a variety of sizes. The most common size though is around about 3.5, 4 inch size. Again, passing the hook through the worm, keeping it inside the worm as you pass it up the hook shank.
That is one of the best baits for cod.
That is the premium cod bait. And that will catch more species in winter than literally any other bait. That is the most fish with bait in winter, and obviously it catches the most fish for that reason. But it is mostly used in the winter time for cod, whiting, dabs, any number of species that are looking for that.
The good thing with that is if you have got a packet of black lug and you've been fishing during the daytime, if you come back and they're all in perfect condition,
yes.
and they were live in the beginning,
yeah,
you can then roll them.
They can be rolled in newspaper, and they can be used for dabs and whiting, smaller species, in a frozen variety just as good as the fresh variety. And they'll catch plenty of small species.
Perfect.
Okay.
So then, Shane, we've got a couple of mackerel here. This is probably
yes.
the most popular bait.
I would say it is, yes.
On our,
yes.
In our fishing. So to prepare a mackerel, obviously, first of all, we need to
open the pack.
Open the pack, and these have just come out of the cool box, and
yes.
they're still nice and
firm.
We'll take that one away. So we've got the mackerel out, discard that one.
Yes.
Next thing, to prepare this bait, we basically need a filleted.
You need a filleting knife, yes.
So there's a filleting knife.
There we are.
Away we go.
I would ideally, fishing for medium-sized species, use a chunk of, say, so big, ideally from the back of the fish, if it's a fresh fish.
The one thing there as well, which is absolutely key for safety reasons, is cut away.
Cut away from yourself at all times for safety reasons. Take a small fillet off the flank there. Then you've got something there that can be used as a single bait, or if you're fishing for smaller species, you can use that as two baits. Ideally using a sharp pair of scissors to cut the piece of mackerel down the middle.
The thing with mackerel is it can be, as you were just saying, it can actually be used as a main bait and as a tipping bait, can't it?
It's so versatile. Mackerel has got to be the most versatile bait that we use. And there you can have two baits, which are good size baits for use for a whole number of species. And we'll now go on to baiting up the mackerel.
Okay, so we're going to put a slightly bigger bait on the bottom hook. What are we going to go for? A piece like that?
A piece like so. I would start by passing the hook through the top of the piece of mackerel. Then I would knit it on in this fashion, in and out 3 times of the piece of mackerel. So you've got the hook in effect sitting right in the bottom of the chunk where the fish is likely to take it.
And is it important to make sure that the flesh is always this side of the hook rather than the other side? Because that's where the fish are going to go.
Yes, because that's where the fish are going to go. That's the softest part of the bait, nearest to the hook point, with more chance of hooking the fish. I really think it's necessary to whip mackerel if you're casting at any range. And I will thus whip using the cotton the same as we used for the sand eel, slightly folding the flanker mackerel back on itself so you've got the fleshy part exposed.
That actually secures it in place, and it also
secures it in
brings
place,
all the flesh out as well.
Brings all the flesh out, which is most important, which is the flaky part that the fish will be looking for when the bait's sitting on the seabed, because that's where all the goodness is in. It's not in the skin, it's in the flesh. And that's what the fish will be looking for.
That's a very oily fish as well, isn't it?
That's a very oily fish indeed. It doesn't have to be 100% presentable, because after all, fish are forever feeding on scent. And with the same principle as the sand eel, pull down the bait stop, which stops it flying up the hook. Keep the hook point well exposed, and there you have a perfect mackerel bait for any species, from dogfish through to ray, huss, spur dog. And that is a perfect size for those species.
Perfect.
And there you have the two baits on the rig ready to go out.
So Shane, Ultima Power Braid. Ultima, obviously everybody knows them as a line company and monofilament company, but now they decided to take the bull by the horns and have decided to bring in a braid.
Right.
They're changing with the times. You and I use braid, as you know, we do slightly different things. I do a little bit of bass fishing.
And I've done some quite deep water fishing in Norway with the heavier braids.
And what did you catch out there?
Well, we were looking for halibut, cod in fast running tides, so we needed a braid that was not going to be too resistant to the tide and pick up the tide, because we were lure fishing with
the most important thing there was actually the diameters.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. We needed to get the diameters right and to cut down on, obviously, the drag on the lures and get them to the bottom quicker.
So the key thing with the braid really is that you can get a thinner diameter at a higher poundage.
Exactly, exactly. Especially when you're fishing for large fish, which you obviously need that shock factor taken into consideration.
Well, the good thing with it, with the Power Braid, is being available from a £6 to £100 now.
Ideal.
Ideal.
Across the whole spectrum, ideal, yes.
So that can be for the lure. You can go lure fishing with the lighter braids, and you can go lure fishing if you're doing heavy lure fishing with a 50 to a 20.
Yes.
Because it's such a...
With the heavier lures, as you say, yes.
And on the boats, obviously, boat fishing, they've been using braid for years, but it's coming into shore fishing.
They have, yeah. And shore fishing is becoming a lot more geared towards the braids, obviously, with the lure fishing side, and also fishing on the rocks and places like that where you need to keep in contact with the lure, also spinning, that kind of thing.
As an angler yourself, you've travelled and fished all over the world, fishing for whales. So you fish in a few countries where you've had to use braid before because you need to cast that little bit further with lighter leads.
Yes, there's been that aspect to it as well, where you wanted to cast a long way with a 2-ounce lead to keep movement on the rig, which it obviously gives you because you're in contact with the rig through the braid. Obviously, there's no stretch in braid like mono.
But the big difference is this is direct contact.
Yes.
So it's immediate action.
Exactly. Yes.
Immediate action.
Immediate to the fish as well. Small fish register much better on the rod tip with braid.
Yeah.
Whereas you wouldn't know, possibly fishing for small bream, that you've actually picked up a fish, or 2 fish even at stages, with the monofilament when you're fishing at distance. With the braid, it picks up every little touch.
It's every touch. You can see everything.
Yeah, that's right. Fantastic. It's transmitted to the rod tip straight away.
So this is really a good move for Ultima, isn't it?
It's a very good move. Yeah. It's a very good move, and in today's market, it's definitely needed.
It's changing times.
That's right.
Ultima's changing with the times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the Ultima Power Braid was initially available in the red and the grey, but they decided to bring in 3 new colours, which is the yellow, blue, and the green.
Okay.
Nothing like putting the product to the test. New power braid and the new fluorocarbon leader. So then, Joe, the knot. Regardless of how good the line is, the knot has to be perfect. If you've got a leader knot that's a poor leader knot with a link on the end of it, and there's a lead flying about, off the lead comes, people are in trouble.
Well, it could well be, yeah.
If you haven't tied the correct line to the hook, and the knot is not secure or hasn't been tied correctly, loss of fish.
It's got to be the correct knot, and it's got to be tied correctly as well.
Tying mono, one of the key things, would you say, is wetting it?
You must moisten the knot and always tuck it down nice and tidy when you're pulling it tight. And make sure it is pulled really, really tight as well, because you don't want any mishaps.
And the reason we tell people that they must wet the knot is because when it's tightening down, what happens with that?
You get heat friction,
yeah,
and it can burn the line.
Yeah.
It can burn the line.
Which then causes a problem with the line.
It weakens it.
Weakens it, yeah.
Yeah, it weakens it, and then, then you could have a mishap.
But as long as they know the right knot, they could basically tie 3 or 4 knots and they could go away fishing for the day.
You could tie 1 or 2 knots really if you wanted to, and that would be enough for your day's fishing, or your lifetime's fishing really.
So basically what it boils down to is tying the right knot for the right job.
Certainly.
So the Ultima Sea Strike, this has been on the market nearly 15 years, I think. I mean, you and I have used this, probably for the last...
Yeah, we started out on that kind of line, that's 15 years ago at least, yeah.
At least. I mean, some of the venues that we fish, we need to be able to use different types of lines, and when we started, we were using the 12, 15 pounds.
Yes, but even now, when you fish off a lot of rock marks, where you're losing gear, you've still got all the properties of the Ultima product, but at a cheap price, because obviously at the end of the day, rough ground fishing, you'll be changing your line or, throwing it away, because half it is, being scoured by the rocks and what have you. So it's at the right price point for that kind of thing to be done. And this can
basically be sold all around the coast. It doesn't really matter where you are. If you're fishing on the beaches, on the rocks, estuaries, etc. It's an entry-level product.
Yeah.
So when you start your fishing, you try a little bit of everything. Try a little bit of beach fishing, bit of rock fishing.
Yes, bit of estuary fishing.
On the piers.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, mackerel bashing.
Bit of that.
Yeah. Boat fishing, and it covers all.
Covers all grounds.
All ground.
It is actually available, obviously in the 2 colours, but poundage-wise, because it's available up to £100, you
can do... From 12 right through to 100, covers everything.
Covers everything.
Covers everything.
Right, the knot I'm going to show you how to tie now is a single grinner knot. This knot is a very useful knot for tying a hook to a hook snood or a hook length. The reason being is when the knot is finished, the tag end doesn't point out the side of the knot; it points back up the knot, back up the line, and you can leave it slightly longer than an 1/8 of an inch, which I've demonstrated on other knots. You can leave it about 1/2 inch long, and this helps when the worm is threaded over the hook to help it stop sliding back down and masking the hook. Now this knot is another simple knot to tie. You get your line, which I'm using 30-pound Memorex red. I'm tying this to a 1/0 Kamasan hook. What you do, you get your line, you go through the eye of the hook, and you pull about 4 or 5 inches through, and then you wrap it around the line 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and then you lay it back over the loop that you've put through the eye of the hook, and then you come back through 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, you moisten it